Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cinemacast. Right here on our YouTube channel, Arrow Entertainment. Hit that like, subscribe button down below if you have yet to do so. You're also watching us on our TikTok channel. Hit that follow, hit that like. Oh boy, we are well into the Halloween season, halfway into the Halloween season. God, this month has already gone by so fast, so incredibly fast. It's not even funny. I mean, where did October 1st go? But here we are. We're well into the Halloween season, and we got another entry in the Damien Leone trilogy. This is Terrifier 3 for today's feature. Now, there's a lot of fans, a lot of hardcore fans for this horror monster, this horror slasher icon known as Art the Clown, who first appeared in the movie All Hallows Eve, which came out several years ago, which actually came out October 29th, 2013. Art the Clown had a short featurette in this anthology, this horror anthology film when it came out, but Art the Clown was played by a different actor at the time. But this was a horror movie this was a anthology horror movie that was almost a little bit different than any other. You know, there's a lot of anthology movies that have come out in the last 20 years, you know, that have tried, you know, to be crowned as the top anthology movie, you know, like making, I guess, trying to make proud of those movies that came out in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. You know, movies like Creepshow, Tales from the Dark Side, Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, and such. And they're still making movies like that to this day, anthology horror movies, you know, full of 10 to 20 minute little short stories, you know, of tales of terror, you know, especially movies like VHS. But I think this is one of the first where a character from one of these short stories in a anthology horror film has made his debut in a full-length featurette. Now, the movie Terrifier, if I can look it up here, the first Terrifier came out in 2016. And of course, all three of these movies were directed and written by Damien Leone. And he doesn't have too many films under his belt. He's an American film director, screenwriter, and producer. He's had a few other films under his belt, one of them titled The Ninth Circle, which was a short film, and this was the first to appear the character Art the Clown. Then there was another short film that appeared in 2011 titled Terrifier, followed by in 2013 All Hallows Eve. The only other movie that I have not seen him do, or that I have not seen that he has done, is a movie called Frankenstein versus the Mummy. And I'm looking at it right now, I'm like, it looks like one of those that's kind of corny, kind of really cheesy, sci-fi type stuff, you know, like the Sci-Fi Channel featuring those real corny horror movies. Then there's another one that came out this year called Stream, which he apparently produced and did the special effects for, but he is well known for All Hallows Eve as a director, writer, producer, editor, and makeup and special effects for all of the Terrifier movies. Now, I could go over the stories of the first two. I might save those for another time. But let's just say the story arc is pretty canon, one by one by one. It takes place several years after, you know, each other. And there are characters that do carry over from previous films, especially one character in particular in this film, aside from Art the Clown. And that is a woman named Victoria Hayes, played by Samantha Scafty. And that character carries over from the first Terrifier. You don't see much of her in the second one, but this one, she definitely makes a grand appearance in here as a possessed soul, who is kind of the sidekick to Art the Clown, who is played by David Howard Thornton. David Howard Thornton, he hasn't been in too many movies. It looks like there has been one that was an independent animated science film called The Exigency. I can't pronounce the name of that. But there's other ones like The Mean One. If you have seen The Mean One or you don't know what that is basically The that is the Grinch-based horror movie, The Mean One. And he plays the titular role as the Grinch in that movie. So yeah, The Mean One. If you are a fan of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, you know, those cartoons, if you're still living under a rock, yes, there is a horror movie based off of the cartoon titled The Mean One, and it stars this character. And also, he is going to be in an upcoming American horror comedy film titled Screamboat, where he plays the killer character Steamboat Mickey. Yes, Mickey Mouse. Even though Disney still holds the rights to Mickey Mouse and its likeliness, however, the copyright for Steamboat Willie, or Steamboat Mickey as they call him, expired this past January. So that gave the studios the okay to say, hey, let's go ahead and make a killer horror movie about Mickey Mouse, or at least the very first Mickey Mouse indeed. So yeah, this actor, you know, he plays a few decent roles, and people have taken a love for Art the Clown. Art the Clown, it's like he's the more modernized version of like Jason Voorhees mixed with Freddy Krueger, mixed with the silent serial killer of, well, Jason and Michael Myers, all scrambled in one. But let me tell you, if you fear clowns, if you have a severe fear of clowns, you probably would not want to watch this movie. Because you got a killer clown in a black and white clown suit going around, just subtly going around in public. And he just randomly kills people. And let me tell you something. When it comes to these movies, okay, the first movie, you know, he was killing off like teenagers and some adults and such. Second movie, he killed off teenagers, their parents, some adults, and there was even a couple kids that were involved that, you know, they did kind of survive. But however, in this movie, it's labeled as an American Christmas supernatural slasher film. Yes, it takes place at Christmas time. There were people who were, when they released this, I think somebody said that they were supposed to release it around Christmas time. But there was petitions for them to release it early. People wanted it as early as October or something. I can't remember what the story was. But let me just say, and since it's already out, and there are people out there that are dubbing this as the goriest horror film of all time. Yes, the goriest horror film of all time. Like, every horror film that I have seen growing up has been gory in its own way. And there's a very excessive amount of gore in a lot of these movies. Now, I will say, after watching this, and before watching this film, I was seeing online different excerpts where people were saying audiences in the UK, there was like 9 people who ended up leaving the theater getting sick and vomiting all over the place because of how gory it is, and people ended up in, like, you know, medical units and such. And I'm thinking, man, those people in the UK, they do not know what good horror cinema is. These are people that have been living under a rock, and they probably the only I want to say maybe the only horror movie they probably ever saw was maybe Poltergeist, which was a PG rated movie, which had a little bit of gore to it, but come on. Over here in America, you got some real horror gore hounds over here. The gorier, the better. And I don't think I've ever heard of a movie theater full of people that get so sick of how gory a horror movie is. And I just got to say this. It's like, people in the UK, you're all such pussies. You are all such pussies going to the theaters to see a movie like this, hearing that it's going to be the goriest movie of all time, you know, that as they so-called say. But yet, you all sit there and you're vomiting in the movie to this. That's like, what is wrong? That's almost as bad as saying, okay, Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman, who went to the movie theater and he jerked off to a movie that starred Priscilla Barnes. and I thought it was a fucking porno that he was watching. It was a shark horror movie. It was a horror movie about a shark that starred Priscilla Barnes, and yes, she played the role of Terry. Her name was Terry in Three's Company, and she was nude in the movie. So I was like, yeah, who wouldn't want to do that? But he was in a cinema beating his meat to this person, you know. So it's like somebody getting off on a horror movie in a cinema. I guess I can sort of compare that to a cinema full of people getting sick over a movie where there are thousands of people who watch horror movies daily and every year. And I've never heard of them needing some kind of medical assistance after watching a horror movie. That's something that you see in television shows and movies themselves, you know? But let's see. So this takes place around Christmas, as you see in the trailer. You know, he's dressed as Santa Claus in the trailer, and you know he's committing murders, you know. But let me tell you this: in this movie, nobody is safe, and I repeat that nobody is safe in this movie. Not adults, not teenagers, not even children. Yes, there are children that meet their demise at the hands of Art the Clown in this film. So, let's get right into it. So, I don't know if you guys seen Terrifier 2, but it definitely picks up at least 5 years after the events of Terrifier 2, which follows the story of a character named Sienna Shaw, who was attempting to rebuild her life after the events of Terrifier 2, and she is suffering from hallucinations of the horrors that have taken place in the second movie that have been dealt upon her, her brother, and the death of her family and such. So, yes, the story is pretty canon with each other in a certain way. Now, I will say, I will give you an opening to this, because it's in the trailer, and you probably already know what happens. You know, he's dressed as Santa Claus, and it's like a 10 minute thing that goes on in the movie where it opens up, you know, it's Christmas Eve and the little girl's hearing footsteps on the rooftop, and she tells mom and dad, and they don't believe her and all. So they figure, okay, what's the worst that can happen? So after her mom gets her to bed and they go back to bed, and she decides to go downstairs, and that's when she sees what she thinks is Santa Claus in the living room dropping presents. But she does her damnedest to hide and be sneaky about it. And then she witnesses him pull an axe from this bag. And then he proceeds to go upstairs, not knowing she is downstairs hiding. And he proceeds to go into her brother's bedroom. Now, even though you don't see the action, but you hear it, and you're only left to your imagination of what Art is doing to her brother. And then he proceeds to go into the main bedroom where you see him stabbing and slashing the father with the axe over and over, wakes the mom up, and the mom tries to make a quick getaway, but it ends up turning pretty gory for herself. Now, seeing the bodies, and you eventually do see the young boy's body that was pretty much brutally chopped up and mutilated, body parts all over the floor. So it's like, yeah, this is one sinister fucking monster who, like I said, nobody is safe. He's butchering kids, he's butchering teenagers and adults and such. He eventually finds a little girl, but her fate is left unknown, you know, unfortunately. So you don't know if he killed the little girl or left her be. But then the movie kind of Tarantinos itself a little bit. So you got this 5 to 10 minute segment going on, and then it goes to 5 years prior. So you go back to the event of, at the end of Terrifier 2, where, you know, Art the Clown may have met his fate, but he is still alive, shows how he's still living, shows what's going on, and he goes and he breaks out the young woman who is possessed in the mental ward, who is Victoria Hayes, which is the character from the first Terrifier. And like I said, you got to watch the first two to keep up with some of the characters and the storyline. But after you witness all of this, and then it starts going fast forward 5 years, you know, present day, and you follow the character Sienna Shaw. You know, she has been picked up by her uncle for Christmas, brought to his house. She's visiting her cousin, she's visiting her aunt. Meanwhile, her brother's away in college. He's trying to get on with his life. But then, she starts having hallucinations and starts seeing her dead friends appear at times. And you see that she's on medication. It is revealed that she was in a mental institution for the past 5 years, getting help and therapy for what she had witnessed and what she had been through. But now everything is starting up all over again. It's another cycle, that includes Art the Clown. He's back to life. He's regenerated. He's got some new tricks up his sleeve, and he's got some more innovative kills, to perform on his new victims within the movie. And yes, there is that one particular scene in the movie where everybody feels like it is like over the top notch gore kill of all. Where in the first movie, and I will spoil it for you guys, if you don't want to hear spoilers, like I always say, go and watch the movies and then come back and hear the review. In the first movie, he ends up knocking out and abducting 2 of these friends. One of them is tied to a chair, where she is forced to witness him murder her friend, who is basically strung upside down, naked. Mind you, she's naked, hanging by her feet, as Art the Clown walks over with a handsaw and proceeds to saw her in half from groin to head. And you are seeing all of this happen in different segments. So you see it happen as she's witnessing it before her eyes. And I want to say that's like, for that type of movie, that's probably the goriest, over-the-top kill for that movie right there. Until Terrifier 2 comes out, and then there's a scene about halfway through almost, where there's a young teen girl who's home alone, and she hears somebody broken in, finds out it's Art the Clown. He chases her upstairs to her bedroom, where she tries to fend him off, but it turns into like a 5-minute gore fest of brutal torture and murder. But he doesn't even really kill her, though. She is still alive throughout the whole segment. He slashes her eye open. He scalps her. He breaks her arms. He mutilates her legs. And then he runs out. He comes back in. He's got like a tub of bleach and a thing of salt. And he's pouring bleach over her open wounds and rubbing salt on it. It's just such a brutal scene. Brutal and graphic scene for everything that is happening to this poor girl in this movie. And that's like, okay, I guess that's kind of over the top with what he did in the first movie to a lot of people. Now, in this movie, there is a scene where you may see it on social media. Everybody's talking about an infamous shower scene that takes place, where it is the titular moment in this movie for the most graphic kill. I mean, there are some graphic kills in this movie, but probably for this movie itself is over the top, where he ends up brutally murdering this couple who are intimately engaged in a shower. And he comes in with a chainsaw, and he first takes out the legs of the guy who's trying to escape while the girl is standing behind, and he proceeds to mutilate her in horrific ways. And then he returns to the guy as he breaks off a leg, and he proceeds to saw him in half from groin on up while he's laying on the floor. And you see a lot of it too. And then he proceeds to saw at his face and his head. It's just, there's a lot of brutality in this movie. And I'm not going to spoil the story for you guys. I'm not going to spoil the ending for you, because the storyline it's an interesting one if you follow horror movies with supernatural elements, which basically is what this movie is, because you have a serial killer who comes back to life in some way each different film. It's not like Jason Voorhees, where we still don't know how Jason Voorhees comes back to life. Same thing with Michael Myers. All you know is like they're possessed with evil or something, that kind of thing. Freddy Krueger, there's always a way of him coming back to life, but he's like a nightmare creature. He's the boogeyman of the nightmares. He's a fantasy serial killer. Whereas with this one, he's real life. He's not like a spirit, but it's almost like he cannot die. He's a being that cannot die whatsoever. You could decapitate him, you can cut off limbs, whatever you feel, and nothing is going to stop him. And not only that, you have this character, Sienna Shaw, who's pretty much like the good of the film. So this movie is kind of like a mesh of good versus evil kind of thing. You got this girl who is basically idolized, in a sense, in the story as an angel, the angel who is meant to defeat the evil, and the evil is Art the Clown. So there is that kind of story going on within this movie. But you come to this movie to expect a new slasher, you know, some fool, some demonic creature or something dressed as a clown, you know, just randomly killing and butchering people and torturing them brutally. But then you got this other subplot that pulls in, and it's like a good versus evil kind of thing. Even to the point where you see that where this girl, you know, her cuts and everything, it all heals up like an X-Men, like Wolverine or something, you know. So there is that element within this movie, which makes it a supernatural movie at that. And I don't think, for me, that, I mean, it doesn't pan over too well, because, like I said, when you come to see a movie like this and you got a guy dressed as a clown and he's brutally murdering people, that's what you come to see. You don't come to see some girl who is meant to be some kind of angel warrior, you know, defeating the evil clown. You know, you don't expect that. But it is a nice little twist to the trilogy, to the films themselves. And it's almost like when you look at something like Nightmare on Elm Street, where they titled them fantasy horror movies. That's what they said. That's what they're fantasy horror movies. It takes place in the dream world. And it's all fantasy based, but it is a horror slasher too. You know, there are quite a few movies out there that are like that follow that type of genre, you know, that subgenre, and then that type of plot line for certain characters and all. But I will say, like, for me, the biggest thing for me is I think this movie was a little too overhyped on the gore fest. Because everybody is praising it for its gore. They say, oh my God, horror movies are back, you know, 2024. This is what horror movies were meant to be. Now, everybody has a different perspective on horror movies in general. You could go for the PG, lighthearted horror movies that just give you a little spook here or there, maybe a ghost story or something. And then you got movies like Halloween where, okay, if you're into John Carpenter's first masterpiece, Halloween, where there's very little blood shown, there's nothing really graphic about it, but it's still a scary movie indeed, because it relies on atmosphere and shadow and lighting, and especially the soundtrack, which gives it the mood, which makes it a little more terrifying than anything else that you have seen, you know, when it comes to a slasher horror film, especially one with an unknown face to it. You know, it's a faceless killer that wears a mask, basically. But then you got movies that come into play like Hellraiser and Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and every other horror movie that has been released on video and such, you know, throughout the 80s and the 90s that have taken inspiration from movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th and made their own pretty much crappy horror movie, basically, you know, like April Fool's Day or something. And there's a lot of movies out there that are like that. Plus, there are movies out there that take into the gore fest as well. And whether you're somebody who's about a little bit of gore, or maybe you're somebody who loves a hell of a lot of gore and blood and a lot of extreme violence, and you come to see how the killer is killing the victim, how they treat the victim. Look at the Saw series. You got a guy who's taking revenge on people who've done him wrong or done others wrong, just to teach him a life lesson, but then somebody takes it a little bit further with a lot of these traps that brutally mutilate somebody to the point where it kills them. And I think when it comes to movies like Saw, I think the audiences are there more for the traps and how people are killed in the movies rather than the story, because the story is so convoluted with confusion. But I've seen them all, and I've tried to piece everything together. They all fit together in some way, like a puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle, sort of. And each character has a particular fate and a particular plot to the whole storyline to where they fit in. Whether you got one character that's in the first one and shows up in the last one, you know, it's like, what was their fate? Well, they're here, they're doing this, they're doing that kind of thing, you know. But then you got movies like this where it's just, you know, it has a story to it. It's an interesting story. Maybe it's not for everybody, but everybody come to see this movie for Art the Clown, the new boogeyman monster, you know, that is not only slaughtering adults and slaughtering teenagers, your kids and are not safe either. Case in point, I'll give you guys one more little fact about this movie. It's a little scene where, yes, in the trailer you see him sitting in a mall as Santa Claus, and all the kids come running up to him. There's a scene where one little boy, he pulls out a wrapped up gift from the bag, and this is after Art is escorted out from the mall, out from the area by security, and the little boy is like, I wonder what this is. And he opens it up, and it's a bomb, and the bomb goes off, killing several adults and even several kids. And you see some of the mutilated bodies of the kids and adults. So yes, no one is safe in this movie. However, to combat the fact that people will say that this is the goriest horror movie of all time, I beg to differ. They haven't seen movies like The Green Inferno or Peter Jackson's Dead Alive or anything from director David Cronenberg, you know, body horror films. There's a lot of films that came out in the 80s and the 90s that were very grotesque that could probably gross somebody out. There has always been some kind of horror movie out there, some new title, you know, directed DVD or theaters or whatever, you know, that has tried to take the gore to the limit. Look at the sci-fi horror Event Horizon. There was so much that was cut from that movie that you could find the scenes online separately in stills. I would think that would probably be a little bit more gory than what Terrifier 3 is. The only reason why they were cut from the film was because when Event Horizon came out, it was going to receive a very hard NC-17, and that's not what Paramount wanted. They had to cut some scenes, they had to cut some time from the film to get it shot down to an R rating, and that is sad when a lot of horror movies that come out in theaters that they do that. But nowadays, a lot of good horror movies, you can find them on streaming apps like Netflix, Hulu, Shudder, Amazon Prime, and such. And I'm surprised to see a movie like this hit theaters, actually. But then again, no major movie distributor probably didn't want to touch this film. You know, like Paramount or Universal or Warner Brothers or any of those. In fact, I think one of my pet peeves about this movie, I will say, is the first minute and a half. When you go into this movie, I will warn you guys, the first minute and a half, you will see nothing but Hollywood distributors and production companies and such. You know, all those logos that pop up, you know, like you got Dark Age Cinema, you got Bloody Disgusting, Fuzz on the Lens Productions, The Coven. There's probably like 10 or 15 production companies that were involved with making this film, and you see them all within the first minute and a half. It gets really tiring. So if you go to see this movie in theaters, forewarn you, you're going to watch a minute and a half of production company logos pop up on the screen. That is probably the most ridiculous thing about this movie, is that part. You know, you're sitting there, you're eating your popcorn, you're like, woo, Art the Clown, let's get on the screen and kill some motherfuckers, right? No, you got to wait for a minute and a half, almost 2 minutes of all these fucking logos going through its cycle. And it's bizarre. It's beyond belief. But I will say, like, with all these production companies, you know, I don't think they really cut anything out from them. I mean, they could have, but I don't think they did. Like, this is pretty gory for a theatrical release. It is. But I will say, it is overhyped with the Gore Fest. People have overhyped it too much with the Gore Fest. You know, they say, oh, this is the most goriest film of all time. You know, the goriest horror film I have ever seen. Yeah, well, it's not. I mean, it is gory. Don't get me wrong. I did enjoy it. You know, I don't want to sit there and say it's my favorite movie to watch every year. maybe a once or twicer for me, but I will say it's not big on the gore fest. You know, a lot of people will say it, but those people haven't seen movies like Dead Alive or even the Hatchet trilogy starring Kane Hodder. I mean, if you haven't seen those movies, you don't know what gore is. This movie, it tries to take it up a notch, but not as much. And I'm pretty sure there are some audiences out there that will say the same thing. Now, rating-wise, people were saying that this got a 90-something% on Rotten Tomatoes and such when it first came out. However, that number did drop to 76% through Rotten Tomatoes and got an average rating of 6.5 out of 10. The website's consensus read that taking an axe to Yuletide cheer and everything else in its path, Terrifier 3 is a bloody, fantastic, shocking stuffer. Or I should say stocking stuffer, I'm sorry. For the holiday season. Let's go on to, writing for Slant Magazine, Rocco T. Thompson described the storyline as being half-formed, but praised the leading performances and the practical effects. Thompson highlighted Scaffody's performance in particular. It's the surprisingly spooky Victoria Hayes who emerges as the film's villain MVP, what with the overwhelming art often playing the second banana in the scenes together. Through it all, Scaffody, this could be Scaffody, I don't even know, exudes a chilling sense of evil from beneath pounds of prosthetics. Let me see if there's any negative response. I'm pretty sure there is. It doesn't seem to be any negative responses for it. However, so we have some international responses. So France Classification Committee banned viewers under the age of 18 from seeing this film. I was 5 years old when I watched Hellraiser and Halloween and Jason. What are you talking about? The first time such a ban has been issued since the release of Saw 3 in 2006. There were also reports of audiences vomiting and leaving theaters after watching the film's opening scene in the United Kingdom. Another report consisted of 2 people passing out during the screening of the film in Australia. Well, that's because they are pretty much told that they can't watch those type of movies over in those countries. Australia and the UK, they don't have the type of freedom we have over here in the U.S. So they're all, they try to ban all that kind of stuff in those other countries. But I say you're all a bunch of pussies for that. God damn. And then there's some controversy behind this film, too, also, where a Christian group outside the movie theater in Kansas City, Missouri. Isn't Kansas City in Kansas? I don't fucking know. There's a Kansas City in Missouri. Protested the film, calling it a satanic Santa film because Art the Clown is dressed as Santa Claus throughout, some of the movie too. Now, if you're wondering if there is going to be a sequel to this, yes, there is. 2003, Damien Leone spoke about plans for a potential Terrifier 4. In September, this past September, a month ago, Leone confirmed that Terrifier 4 was in development already. So you see, these movies, they're back to back to back. Sort of. Terrifier came out in 2016. Terrifier 2 came out. Terrifier 2 came out in 2022. It only felt like it came out a year ago. It didn't feel like 2 years ago. But okay. And then you got this one that came out right now. So you might see Terrifier 4 come out either next year or in 2026. Now, I will say, minus everything, and I've given my opinion on this movie. Yes, it's not as gory as audiences made it out to be, but I feel it is a completely different monster altogether for what new audiences are probably hoping for to break free from that spell of paranormal type movies. Because everywhere you go, you got a movie about a ghost or something that's being possessed and haunted, and we're trying to break free from that. Give us something fresh, give us something new. And this character's been around for the last 10 years just about, and he's got a fresh new movie right now, and there's audiences that are loving it. I liked it. I won't say that I loved it, but I will say it was something to watch. Was it as gory as people have proclaimed it is? No, not that gory. I wouldn't say it's something where people are going to sit there and vomit in theaters. No. If they vomit in theaters in the UK and Australia, they're big pussies. Let me tell you, that's a big pussy move to throw up during a horror movie and something like that. But if you guys want to check it out, you guys can. It's in theaters now. Hopefully it'll come to streaming services within the next couple months. What's my rating on Terrifier 3? I'll give Terrifier. I will be reasonable, and I will give Terrifier 3 an 8 out of 10. I was going to shoot for a 7, but I'm like, you know what? It was a little entertaining. There was a couple moments that had a good chuckle to it. And especially a scene where you got Art the Clown wearing these goofy-ass sunglasses. These flower sunglasses, you know? It's like, it's just a goofy moment. But I give Terrifier 3 an 8 out of 10. If you're into gory horror movies like this, if you're into that kind of thing, go check it out. If not, you're probably not going to bother watching this. But it is what it is. So, what did you guys think about Terrifier 3? Did you go to the theaters to see it? Did you see it on any streaming platforms? Let us know down in the comments section what you guys' feelings and thoughts of Terrifier 3 are. And that does it for today's episode of Cinemacast, guys. Thank you for joining me today for today's feature, which was Terrifier 3. And until next time, guys, we'll see you right back here at the cinema.